This is Brian and Brock's app adventure, and this might be a really misguided session or two, but Brock and I have been working together on and off since like 2006, something like that.
Something like that.
So a long time of pair programming together means that we're pretty funny when we work together. We like to make fun of each other, and we thought this would be an interesting session to show you guys how we approach building apps. This isn't the way to build apps, this is just a way to build apps. We're going to walk through the fundamentals of building a backend and a front end. I work currently at Adobe, but don't judge me. It doesn't mean I work on the updater team. I've had 3 people ask me that. I don't know who those guys are either, and if I find them, I'll kill them for you. I mostly work on the PhoneGap project and Apache Cordova. And Brock, introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I work at Chloe Inc., and I used to work with Brian at Adobe. And I started Chloe Inc. with with Rob Ellis, who we both worked with together as well. So the history, intertwines and goes back. And I'm working on a static web server called Harp, which does implicit pre-compiling for you, which you'll get a peek of today, and a CDN that's designed for front-end developers. And it's called Surge, and it's in alpha stages. You're going to get a sneak peek at it. It's I don't encourage you to deploy to production on it because it's totally early days. But yeah, that's what I'm working on.
Yeah, so the kind of big, I guess, story that we're going to try and tell you guys today when we get the screen back on, because pair programming without a screen is not going to be very helpful, is full stack JavaScript. And so again, this isn't the only way to do things. We found one, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're
actually
good.
We're good.
Thank you. Yeah.
So full stack JavaScript is kind of becoming a thing. Again, it's not the only thing. There's lots of ways to build apps. We think it's a pretty compelling story, though, and it at the very least, it's a lot of fun. And so, if you're going to be building apps, you may as well have fun doing it. Is this stuff suitable for you or your organization? I don't know. Maybe not. If you have a room full of Objective-C developers, I don't know where those guys came from, but if you do, you probably want to build an iOS app. You don't want to build a web app.
Yeah. Another way to look at this is it sounds like everyone's heard of Node.js, and you're probably kind of wondering, why are people running JavaScript on the server? Don't we all agree it's terrible? You can kind of just get a sense of what this stack looks like without having to do much work. You guys can just chill and watch us, and yeah, feel free to interrupt us, or you see us do something wrong, just scream at us. It's totally cool.
How do I play?
I think it's over there. Present.
Google is terrible at UX. All right, we have slides. Woo. Am I going colorblind, or is that wrong? That's kind of weird.
They're like pink slides on a pink display.
Maybe it's just the theme, like the conference theme, or maybe
magenta. There you go.
Oh, that's reasonable.
Okay.
Feel free to tweet at us. I think our handles are consistent across all the various social networks except for Elo, because we're not cool enough to get invites for that, but that's okay, because I don't really care about it. Brock and I are both from Canada, if you're wondering what the accent is. And that's just an awesome picture. Really, that's what Canada's like. Totally. And so we're going to build an app, and if you're going to build an app, you have to start with some form of problem, hopefully, unless you work in a really large organization. Then usually you start with a solution and figure out what the problem is later. That was a joke. So this guy's got a problem. Being Canadian, we stereotypically both love hockey a great deal. Who's that player?
That's Lars Ellers, who's Danish. Yep.
Yeah.
Plays for the Montreal Canadiens.
There's quite a few good Danish players, actually. Yannick Hansen and Vancouver Canucks.
That's right.
Anyways, that elbow is super illegal. You're not supposed to do that in hockey. That happens when huge guys skate around on the ice that hate each other.
Yeah.
So we love the NHL and we love watching hockey. and I'm going to show you NHL.com, and you just can't make this stuff up. So this is actually the worst website in the world. And no, it hasn't finished loading yet. Give it another 15 minutes and you'll see all these crazy assets. Like, I don't know, man. Like, and it appears to have loaded. Oh, they've changed their terms of service. It's really, really bad. And, you know, all I want to do is find out when the next game is, man. Oh, that's hard to see.
So right now is the time when everyone's doing drafts and doing pools. I don't know if you guys do fantasy leagues here with, I don't know.
Curling? Is that is that the Danish national sport? I don't know.
But what we like to do is we like to, you know, draft players and then we compare them and whatnot. And obviously we need an API to like do that, right? Obviously. We're not going to do this like by hand like suckers. So the NHL doesn't have an API, which is a real bummer. But what we're going to do is we're going to build one. So we'll roll up our sleeves and we'll just handle this. So to get an idea of what we're going to do here, we're going to break this down into two parts. One is we're going to use Node.js and build a module that screen scrapes that awesome site you just saw and exposes it as an API. And we'll deploy that. And then in part two, we're going to build an application that can consume that API. And we will deploy that application to the web, and we will wrap it in native wrapper using PhoneGap. At least this is what we're going to attempt to do.
Yeah,
so
there's a lot of moving parts. So Express.js, for people who don't know, is probably the most popular web server choice for Node.js. It's not your only choice. In fact, you can write even lower level stuff if you want to write your own web server. If you enjoy pain or whatever, I don't know why you do that. And then Cordova is kind of the open source guts of the PhoneGap project, just in case you didn't know what those things were.
So this is deliberately ambitious. Like on the web, create an API that screen scrapes, get on Android, get on iOS, and on the web, right?
2 hours.
2 hours.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Just about everything. This morning I was installing the Android SDK.
So we're going to talk, since we have so much time to do this, we're going to talk a little bit about this technologies as we go, just so everyone knows like what we're working with. But let's start with the elephant in the room, which is JavaScript. Like, you know, we were forced to use it in the browser for years, and then when we can choose anything we want on the server, now all these people are like, yeah, let's use JavaScript on the server, because it's sweet.
Yeah, JavaScript's got kind of a sordid history. It's not the prettiest language. Okay, it's the ugliest language, and it for years was just used for kind of script kiddie business. But interesting property of JavaScript is because it's of the web, all the other browsers had to implement it, and then the browser wars kind of got really heated up, and different browser implementers effectively were competing with each other to have the fastest and best browser ever, which meant that all of these huge companies that are browser vendors had a vested interest in seeing the JavaScript runtime become fast. And it got really fast. Slowly it's been standardizing into better forms. Kyle in the front can probably talk to you more about that. If you went to his talk earlier too, you could probably have seen it. If you don't know JS, I recommend getting the book. You don't know JS. It's got a lot of quirks. Once you get to know it though, it turns into a pretty good friend. And the real beauty of JavaScript is that it runs absolutely everywhere. So blazing fast, and it runs everywhere. I don't think it's going to go away. So then there's Node, and you want to take a stab at what the hell is Node?
Yeah, sure. So Node.js is taking Google's V8 JavaScript engine that's in Google Chrome, and it does asynchronous, like evented I/O. I think this is a fairly big deal because the creation of Node wasn't about building a runtime around JavaScript. It was about building a server-side technology that was asynchronous I/O, which Ryan Dahl kind of started with the fundamental thesis that I/O is done wrong.
Didn't he start with Ruby too?
Yeah, it was. So if you actually go far enough back in the repo in Node.js, it turns into Ruby. It started off as a Ruby web server called EBB, and it came out shortly after this web server called Thin, which was a profound improvement on what we had before that. And so Ebb kind of didn't really get much fanfare, even though it was pretty nice. But Ryan Dahl then kind of rethought it and was like, okay, is Ruby really the right language for this? Because people are so used to the synchronous style of doing I/O, right? Like to open up a file and just wait for the response and then use it. And it kind of dawned on him at that time that JavaScript's kind of perfect for this, because people are already used to this programming paradigm that you like bind an event on a button, and then like when this button gets clicked, execute this function. So it was kind of like a revelation that JavaScript's perfect, and people will be able to not get tripped up as much because it will look familiar. And that's going to be a whole lot easier than like trying to convince the entire Ruby community to start doing their I/O asynchronously, or trying to convince the Python community, right?
Yeah, it was a real natural kind of evolution, but it's important to note that Node.js is not JavaScript. It's a runtime, and it happens to be JavaScript. But other languages can target Node too. The big feature for Node actually had nothing to do with Node. Node originally shipped with, actually JavaScript itself doesn't have the concept of a module or a package, not yet anyways. And that made code reuse a bitch. Basically, you were embedding script tags into a page, and everything was a global, and this was a terrible way to program. Eventually, Node kind of settled on a pattern called CommonJS, which are modules that scope themselves, and they can't pollute the global, which was great. And then later came NPM. There was a whole bunch of package managers in the early days, and they were battling it out to find out who would be the package manager to rule them all. And NPM just did the best job. And so I think it actually may have done the best job in all package managers to date. The key thing for NPM is it scopes modules lexically. So if you have a module, it can depend on a different version of a module that another module in that same larger application might have. So that didn't make any sense. Let me try that again. So you can have two versions of the same module, and they won't pollute each other.
Yeah.
Which seems like a really simple explanation, but it's got a profound impact on your application architecture.
Yeah, the trade-off, of course, of this is that you are using more of a disk, because you might have different versions of the same module, like nested dependency kind of thing. And it was just kind of accepted that on a server, that trade-off is worthwhile. And
disk is cheap.
Yeah, disk is cheap.
On the client, you probably don't want 3 versions of jQuery.
Yep.
Just saying. So
here's our actual steps. Here's our action items. So we're going to build the Node.js library, and we'll actually publish that to NPM, so you guys get a sense for what that actually looks like actually creating a module.
Has anyone here published a module to NPM?
Right on.
Obviously you have,
people?
Kyle. Come on.
Kevin.
Okay, cool. So this will be your first time seeing this. So this is some good knowledge for you to take home and see what this process looks like. Publishing a module to NPM is trivially easy, and so you should do it, and you should do lots of it, because open source is helpful for all of us.
Yeah.
You want to drive on yours, probably?
I can either drive on yours or work this.
This computer is circumspect. I wouldn't do it.
It's always weird using someone else's computer to write code.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy.
How many more challenges can we give ourselves here?
Yeah.
So we'll just give this a minute.
No bueno, man. Pull it in and out. Oh, that sounded really bad. Oh, you might have to code on mine.
All right, let's do it.
This worked on yours before. There's no reason why this wouldn't work. Okay, detected.
Built-in display.
It sees it, but it's not showing it.
Let me change, hold on, let me change the resolution. Awesome.
All right. use mine, just to make it even more fun.
All right.
Oh, that might have been it.
Okay. Try one more time. This is when you tell your PM, like, yeah, everything's on track. We're going to be shipping on time.
Totally.
All right.
This is a very realistic demo. This is what programming is actually like. 90% setup and complaining.
All right. I think we're good.
Yeah, that's super legible.
You guys can see that okay?
So normally you'd have to start by installing Node.js. It's just go to nodejs.org, run the installer. It's not too tough. Once you've got Node,
you'll have Node and NPM at that point. So that's your only dependency to carry on from where we are. So we're going to start with a module. We'll just start by making a directory. We'll call it NHL. So we have this empty directory, and we can go use npm to init a package. And all this does is it helps us create a package.json file. And it's going to go through some prompts, which is what we're going to name it.
Package.json is the standard Node manifest format. And there's a lot of power in this simple little manifest. It doesn't list out all the actual files, but it does ask for things like where your entry point is. You can define things like whether or not the module is going to be installed globally, if there's a test command. Actually, test command is awesome, but we'll get into that. I have no idea what license that is or why that's the default.
It's ISCs just like MIT, basically.
Is it?
Yeah.
Why is he picking
It's just a little more terse. It's actually nice. I like it. Okay, so what we have now is a package.json file, and this is like describes your package and what its dependencies are. It also does a few other things that are kind of nice. Like you got this scripts block. Right now we don't have anything for test, but we can run npm test, and it executes that code that you saw there. So we're gonna actually replace that with an actual test runner, so that we're doing this properly and all that.
Big key here, and anytime you check out somebody else's npm module, all you need to know is npm test. You don't need to know the specific incantations for whatever particular test library that person might be attached to or what that module uses.
Right.
This means that you have portability between programmers, that they can just jump into a project, immediately run the tests or any other scripts without having to understand the underlying details.
All right, so it's too bad that sidebar doesn't get bigger. Can you guys see this at all?
Not really, man. Not really.
Okay, that's a bummer. You guys see the code though, right?
Yeah.
All right, I'll just make it clear what file I'm in. We're not going to be dealing with a lot of files here, and I'll take you along that. We can actually just slam that over. Okay. So the first thing we're going to need is a file for our entry point. We've specified that the main is index.js, which what that tells this module or whatever's requiring our library is what is the entry point. So it's arbitrary. You can make it whatever you want. If you don't have anything specified, it will default to main.js. But we're just going to touch an index.js file. So we have that. And we're also going to make a directory for our tests. And then we need a couple dependencies. So we can add those right here, which is, it's hard to speak and type at the same time, I find. So we're going to use, we're going to need JS DOM for this. So this is actually, you could use whatever you want to build this API, obviously, and every language has a DOM parsing library. But this is, I think, a particular good use case. Like, I'm not encouraging you guys to build screen scrapers, but this is actually an interesting use case for using JavaScript, because we've got these battle-hardened libraries that have been used in production for quite a while, and we can actually just use them on the server. The only thing we need is we need a DOM on the server. So we're going to use JS DOM to get a DOM on the server, and then we'll be able to fetch a web page and then use something like jQuery to parse that DOM, which jQuery happens to be pretty good at DOM parsing. So I'm not going to specify a version there, but you can put a version in there. And we have a couple dev dependencies as well. And this is for our testing. And the difference between the dependencies and dev dependencies, actually, why don't you explain this while I type?
Yeah, no problem. Actually, you should do the installs with npm save or whatever.
Okay.
Well, it doesn't matter.
All right.
So dev dependencies are things that you're going to use when you're in development, like test libraries and documentation tools and assertion libraries. You don't want to install those in production necessarily, and so dev dependencies is just a nice way to do it. When you run npm install, it's going to look at the package JSON, and it's going to generate a folder called node_modules, and it's going to put all the modules in there. You can also write back into package JSON if you want to by doing a -- save when you install modules as you're going along. The manifest inside of npm or inside of the package JSON kind of acts as canonical. There's a lot of debate whether or not you should check the node modules folder into your repo or not. Some people think you should. Some people think this is heresy. Neither person's right. It just depends on your particular circumstances. I like using package JSON to say very explicitly what versions and what packages I want to have in my repo.
I do as well. I kind of showed you a poor practice. But what Brian was getting at is you can actually npm install JS DOM -- save. And then when you do that, it will install it, but it's also going to open up your package.json file for you and put explicitly what the version is. So that's handy.
The versioning scheme npm follows is called semantic versioning. It might be better called pedantic versioning. I don't know. Semver is kind of complicated. Effectively, it rolls down into major, minor, patch. And major changes mean that your API might change in between versions. That caret right there is a source of much debate. I would kill it, and I would be explicit. I think that's your safest bet. You can learn about the kind of, I don't know, particulars of what those different things mean. And you can say greater than or less than a certain version or whatever. But I think being mega explicit is really important.
If you wanted it to automatically pull in patch versions, you could put an X in there as well. It's very flexible. For the most part, it's going to do what you expect. It's a pretty mature tool at this point. So what I did here is I put Mocha test. So this is what I want it to execute when someone runs npm test. And there's just kind of a little bit of a gotcha that's worth knowing, which is if I run that, which, sweet, we got all our tests passing.
Woo! Time to tell the PM that I got my work done for the day.
So what it did was it ran Mocha test, but if I were to, it's essentially no different than us going Mocha test, except you'll notice that doesn't work. And the reason for that is that npm does this thing to help you out, which is it will load it'll load that into your exports so that those paths are available to you. And that's particularly handy on cross-platform. Like if you were to use, if you were to develop this so that it runs on Windows or on Unix, it's really helpful, because the other way we could do it is we could actually just go with the explicit path.
Be node modules /mocha/bin/mocha or something like that.
Yeah, it goes
and so
bin/mocha. And this is, sorry, npm test. So that's going to work, but that would break on Windows. So we do it like because of the pathing. So by doing it like that, it's going to work on both Windows and Mac.
Anybody here use Windows? Oh, shit.
About half or over.
A little over
Everything
half.
we're showing you should work on Windows as well. Node is supported on Windows, and the practices that we're doing here, it should be fine though. Like put an asterisk on that because I don't use Windows, so you might run into a gotcha or two.
Yeah, and if that's the case, don't hesitate to tweet at us and say, hey, this thing didn't work on Windows. Because we do try and write things as cross-platform as possible. It's part of the idea.
So I am going to show you what this looks like. So this is what NPM does when you NPM install. Is it just like it does?
Oh, you don't.
I don't know how we make that bigger.
That's okay.
It just takes those dependencies and resolves them and puts them in node modules directory. There's nothing really special about the node modules directory other than node looks there for modules when you require them.
Remember, and I said that node modules are lexically scoped, and so you'll see that JS DOM has its own set of dependencies, and those in no way impact any of the other modules higher up in the tree. And this is where things get pretty powerful with NPM. You can reuse a lot of people's knowledge without having to know how it all works under the hood. You don't have to worry about conflicts when you build your app. Time to write some tests.
Okay.
I guess we got to do some.
So we've got an empty test directory, and we've got an empty index.js file. Essentially, our environment is ready to actually write some code and make something useful. So the first thing I'm just going to create a file in the test directory. We'll just call it basic. So I'll just touch test basic. You can do this through your IDE or whatever you prefer to use. So the very first thing we need is, obviously, we need to be able to require this library. And this is another tip for you guys. We're going to require it like this. We could do it like this and specify the index file explicitly, but that's not how Node does it. The Node will look in the package.json file to see what the main file is. So by doing this, what we're really saying is I want you to require that directory, and then Node figures that out for you.
Require is super powerful. It lets you pull in, obviously, anything that's in your node modules folder and anything by a path that's in your path. It is possible to do global node modules, but it's considered poor form. And the good old sanity test. This is always the first test I write, and then I take lunch. Got my test passing, man.
So I did add should as a dependency, and all that does is it's just an assertion library. That I tend to use.
There's tons of these things. There's a built-in set of assertion libraries. You get lots of ways to test truthiness in JavaScript, which is probably a good idea. Dun, dun,
so
dun.
We wrote our test. Yeah. All right. So our library exists, which is really good. And if all you need is a library that exists, you're done. We can publish this, and actually we're going to. So
we should show exporting, I guess, is the next thing.
Yeah, I'll move to that next.
Yeah.
I'm going to bump this to 3 because I did this last week in Copenhagen and published a 0.1 and I think a 0.2 already. So
NPM's fairly militant. Once you publish something, it's there forever. Which is a feature, not a bug, because that means if you have open source authors out there that are republishing artifacts to older versions, and that can cause problems for people. So you have to be very explicit about what you're publishing. And the NPM registry, I guess it's worth mentioning, is a big, large commons that's out there. That's being run by a company called NPM Inc. And they're working on an enterprise version to monetize and pay for this thing. But so far, it's all been by donation. And It's a huge open source repository. I don't know how many modules are up there now, but there's a lot.
So you can see, oh, it's already got downloads. Sweet. All right.
Way
cool.
to go.
So yeah,
Are you squatting NHL? That's awesome.
I just took it during the presentation last week in Copenhagen.
This is another great feature of NPM is it's a full-on land grab. So if you've got any ideas for a cool module name, you should grab them.
So this is complaining at me a little bit because I don't have a README, and but it's got the dependencies there, so you can see what it's depending on, and it'll give you some crude statistics, which are kind of helpful of like how active this project is. There's actually I think 37,000 modules.
Is that how many there is now?
Yeah. So 37,000 in total, and there's 22 million downloads in the last day. It's a very active system. 97,000, yeah.
97,000 packages. I bet you 7,000 of them are test runners. Another
and flow control.
Yeah,
there's
totally.
10,000 flow control libraries. Okay.
Yeah, so NPM publish is all you got to do to publish. So you don't really have an excuse. You will have to create an account with NPM, but that's, we're all used to doing that at this point.
I think it might happen implicitly through the UI. I think there's who am I? So you log in and I already have a token, so it knows who I am. But it should prompt you, I think, to create a project. So you should be able to just follow the steps that we just did there, and you'll have your own library, which is cool.
So now anybody here can pull this library down and run those tests, which is not really all that exciting, but it will get cooler.
So we need to actually build something useful now, right? So let's build another test, and these tests are going to be all of them pretty contrived, but it'll give you an idea of what flow works for me, and you can do it completely different if you want. But we will test a function call called team, and this is going to fail. And it does. And it says expected undefined to exist, but it doesn't. So this function doesn't exist, this one called team.
It's worth mentioning, we're not trying to tell you guys that you have to write tests first. I don't necessarily write tests first. Just write some tests. It's usually a pretty good idea. This one gets pushed back. I met with these guys a little while ago, and they were like, well, we don't have time. You do. And you definitely don't have time to rewrite your app when it's going all haywire and you don't know why. And yeah, tests are important.
So we're going to do the minimum here to make our test pass.
Exports is a fancy global object that Node injects that you use to pass stuff out of the context. There's a few different patterns for how to do this. You can basically pass anything back on the exports object that you want in Node land. And hey, Kyle, if we're saying something completely dumb, or if you have something to yell at us, you should do it. I'm sure you're chewing on your lip. You're just tweeting. These morons don't know what they're doing. Okay. Took them 30 minutes to get a test passing.
All right. So we've got this awesome foolproof test, obviously, that's gonna make this work. Now let's use JS DOM, and let's grab a resource. I'm going to show you what we actually want to grab. Let me see here. I got my little cheater thing here going on.
I thought you were going to open up Inspector and start trolling through the...
I'm going to. I just need the URL. So this is essentially the page.
Brock's an Oilers fan. I'm a Canucks
fan. So this is the table that we have to work with. This is our data. And we'll look in here. And it's kind of what you'd expect. there's a table with a class data on there, so we can hook into that. Not sure if this works. Oh, nice. Yeah, right on. Can make that bigger.
Yeah. Anybody here using Firefox these days? I recommend going back if you aren't. It's gotten really good, and the dev tools are fantastic. And no Google Hangouts plugin, which is a feature, not a bug.
So our data is here. We just need to extract it. So we'll hook into this class data and just pull out this table, and then we'll kind of massage it a little bit. We're going to need to, ignore the headers. There's some stuff in here if you... okay. Yeah, like these headers we don't want. There's also, they broke out goalies into another table, and we'll need to just like tweak that a little bit. But we'll just start by getting the getting JS DOM, getting the DOM on the server, and go from there, and we'll fetch this asset. So essentially, this is our URL, and I'll just put it in here. This is what we're fetching, and we'll make this function do two different things. We'll have a drop down for which team we're going to pull from, and we will make a drop down. That's when we build the app. We're going to make this function take the team and the year. Thank you. Yeah. 2 arguments. That's so much easier to say.
Yeah.
And everyone in the room knows what that means.
Or an arity of 2. That's probably better for David Nolan's talk than ours.
So, which is team and season. And for now, we will just hard code this to that. And we need JS DOM.
There's a few libraries that do this too. JS DOM is probably one of the more bulletproof ones, but there's also another one called Cheerio. It's pretty popular. This is one of the challenges, I think, in the JavaScript ecosystem because it's exploding so fast. There's a ton of options out there, which may or may not be a feature to you. There's not a whole lot of curation, so it's up to you to figure out what things fit for your project and what libraries appeal to you. There's a library for just about everything and a license for just about all of them. So it's worth exploring, and that's part of the fun of this too.
So we'll just fetch this asset URL, and then I know I'm doing this a little different than the docs just said. I'm not completely sure this works, but we'll figure it out. So what JS DOM returns to you is pretty cool. It just returns the window object, so it's really no different than being on the client. And so we'll fetch this. This actually takes a third argument, callback, obviously. And we'll call, in our callback, we're going to return an error if there is one, which we'll just shortcut that, and an object of like a list of players, right?
So there's a whole bunch of stuff here that might look a little bit funky. The first bit, so when we call JS DOM, the last argument is a function, and this is really normal in node programming where we want to have some kind of asynchronous callback. And so the node runtime is going to be ticking along in an event loop, and then once it's done its business, it's going to call that callback. In node style, the callbacks will always have an error first, and then whatever data might get passed back to it. The reason for the error first is because if there's a problem, you probably want to address that before you go on and process a bunch of data. And so this is just the node style. There's other styles. There's lots of flow control libraries. Of late, promises have become pretty popular. None of these are right or wrong. There's no absolute answers here. These are just different techniques. When you're programming a node, you probably want to be consistent with the way the runtime works. And you probably want to use callbacks. But you don't have to. If you want to use promises, you can do that.
So we'll just make sure that this returns an array. should be an array. I have no idea if that's right. Let's see. npm.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the BDD style, but I'm an old man and I like test unit.
All right, should Node.js. Should JS. How are we doing for time, Brian?
We're just about at the end of the first hour.
Okay. Okay, so I want to learn how to test for an array. Should be instance of array and have length of 4. Okay.
That's pretty wordy.
Okay, let's see if this pass. No. Object is not a function.
Oh. Your last thing is a callback. But does that callback pass an array?
Players.
Back in your implementation. Oh no, it does.
All right, does anyone see what I'm doing wrong here? Function that takes team season callback.
Oh, team season callback. Go back to your test. Team season. There's a callback. And it's looking for
Players.
Mm-hmm.
It could be our JS DOM call here. Well, let's use our test to guide us. Index JS 7.
Yeah, it's JS DOM. Yay.
Mm.
No.
Okay. So I think that executed properly, but what happened here is we got a timeout of 2 seconds. So by default, Mocha, it will bail if it takes longer than 2,000 milliseconds. It'll just like say that that test failed. So in this case, and we're probably reaching over the ocean, right, for this call. I imagine NHL.com.
They might have a CDN, but not for all those ads.
Yeah. So all we're going to do here is we're going to just like bump up the timer so that we give it a little more time to like fetch that asset. And we can just do that here in Mocha. There's a flag of -t. So the timeout, let's give it lots of time. We'll give it 8 seconds to do it. Sweet. Okay. Now, we hard-coded that array. So we're kind of, BSing ourselves a little bit here right now. So we want to actually use that window object and talk to the DOM and start extracting the data that we want out of it. So if we fly back here to our actual page here, we could go into inspector. Where's the console?
Oh, that one.
Oh, there it is. Where?
You're used to Chrome, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. All right. Let's just load this up. There it is. It's down there. Okay. So we've got a problem here. We're going to parse this with jQuery, but NHL.com doesn't use jQuery, right? Of course, we don't have to use jQuery. We could just use query selector all.
I'm shocked they don't use jQuery, to tell you the truth. They seem to use everything else.
Yeah, I know, right?
Why not?
So
just throw that in there too, just in case.
Query selector all. So let's just make sure that we're, that actually is there, and it looks like it is. So if we use query selector all, we can grab that. But extracting all that data is going to be easier with something more familiar like jQuery. So what do we do here? We want to parse this DOM, but jQuery is not there. But JSDOM's got this really nice feature, which the second argument that you notice that I left empty, you can actually inject scripts into the document and use it. So we can, after we fetch this payload, we can actually put jQuery into it and use jQuery on that DOM as if they were using jQuery themselves. So let's, I'll just use my little cheat thing here. I like that this is jQuery like 1.5. All right. It'll work.
Battle tested, man.
Yeah.
It's probably all over the internet.
And one other thing we might want to do, so like we'll have access to that $sign now, but it's going to be on the window object. So just to make it a little more familiar, we will just go var $sign is equal to window dot $sign. And now we've got right here, we should have an environment that feels a lot like just being in that console with jQuery.
There's another library toy tool out there called Phantom.js that if you find this type of thing fun, is worth checking out also. And it gives you a full-fledged WebKit browser, but it's headless. And so you can script it, and you can take screenshots, and it's really useful for testing and general web hackery.
Now this is the part where I'm going to like do the hand wavy thing and cheat a little bit. Thank you. All right, so let's see how this turned out here. Callback. We called it callback, so we will just do it like that. So let's just walk through this.
Yeah.
So what we did here is we're going to return an array of players. So we just created that array ahead of time, and we're using where is rows come from?
Oh, they actually say sweater in the code. So whoever is writing NHL.com knows their hockey.
Yeah, they don't call it a jersey.
It's
Yeah,
a sweater.
it's a sweater.
That's an important distinction.
It's very Nordic, actually, kind of.
Well, it's fucking cold on the ice. That's what it is.
Yeah. So what rows is it's like, it's just kind of like that query we did in the console. And what we're wanting to do is grab the first data object, which is that table. And now we are going to do a find on that data set and pull all the table rows out. But we don't want anything with a class of HDR. So we're kind of blacklisting those nodes. So what we end up with is an array of DOM elements, and we're going to iterate over them, and we're going to pull out the values that we want. And what we should have now is we should have a working library. So we're going to npm test this. Takes 8 seconds.
Oh.
Must have a typo.
What did it say? I missed it.
This must re-error first.
Ah.
Would be my guess. Sweet. Okay, so this passes. Just to prove that that isn't.
Oh, show him the node REPL and jump in there and pump out some data for fun.
Sure. Should we take a break now, though?
Well, I'll leave it up to you guys. What do you think? Do you want us to just keep going? Okay. I will take your silence as assent.
We'll just finish this. We'll get this published, and then we'll take a quick break. Sound good? I don't want to hold you guys up if you want to check out a different talk. So if you do, just dart. It's totally cool. All right. So to test this, we need to make sure that our data set is actually
has data in it.
Yeah. So we'll go players. Our first element dot, what is it, name?
Yeah.
Should equal Jordan
Everly.
You're right. Thank you.
Jordan Eberle scored probably the greatest rookie goal I've ever seen in my entire life on his first day on the ice 4 years ago. Guy's incredible.
All right.
Yay.
So this is passing. We actually have real data, and we're going to bump our version in our package.json to, we'll just go 3.1. I'll let you guys debate whether that's the right way to go or not. Sorry.
Usually that would be a patch.
Publish.
I guess it's a patch.
And we're published, so we actually have a functioning module now. So I think this is a good breaking point.
Yeah, okay.
So when we come back, what we'll do is we'll actually put an HTTP interface on this so that we can fetch these resources, and it acts just as an API. And then we'll move on to the client side, which will consume this API. So a few good questions came up during the break. One was why my code doesn't have semicolons in it that I showed you. And like, I don't even think about it, and I'm sorry. Like, I'd put them in if the muscle memory was there. It's how I prefer to write my JavaScript. I haven't ran into problems writing it that way. I'm not saying that you should. You should do what you're more comfortable with. I'm not an evangelist trying to convince you to do it otherwise. But I prefer it that way.
I think a bunch of like our team that we've worked on kind of moved in the direction of understanding JavaScript enough that we knew we didn't need semicolons necessarily. This is a huge topic of debate in the JavaScript community though, and if your team is into semicolons, don't piss your team off. Just write semicolons.
Yeah, the best advice I could give is like don't spend energy like debating that or changing that.
Yeah, it's a part of the language.
If you make a commit to somebody's library and they don't have semicolons, I wouldn't encourage you to make a pull request that like adds semicolons to the whole thing, or vice versa.
Don't do that, yeah.
Yeah, or vice versa.
Definitely don't do that either.
Yeah, another thing came up was the done on the test running.
Oh, I don't.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, I think you should show it. It's a really good question. So node's non-blocking, it's asynchronous, and as it's executing, you need to give it some kind of signal that it's done.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
So in these tests here.
Oh, sorry, man. I was showing someone difference between async.
Oh yeah, cool. So yeah, we're calling done after all these tests, right? And like, why are we doing that? Well, the explanation can be really long, but what I'll shortcut it and basically say that what's being passed in here is the next test, and because it's non-blocking, we actually need to fire that. So when we're finished making this assertion, this done is more or less this function right here. Okay, so it just when you run. The way that Mocha works under the hood when you call these it functions is it's like putting them into this array. I've heard of this called onion skinning. Like I don't know what the right term is for it, but basically you end up with this array that you cascade through all the functions, and this is how you kind of get around like the asynchronous awkwardness. Like your first time writing Node.js, like this maybe will be very confusing for you at first, but it's not as bad as you might think. I promise.
So should we get
I feel like there's one other question.
Semicolons was the big one.
Yeah.
Do we want to bust through these slides?
Let's finish the server, and then we'll just totally move to the client.
Okay.
Okay.
That works for me.
So what we have here is we've got a module that's published to npm, and it screen scrapes nhl.com, and what we need now is an HTTP interface, right? So we actually have an API that we can talk to. By show of hands, how many people here weren't in the first session? Okay, quite a bit. Okay, I will show you. We'll do a bigger recap then.
Maybe run the tests.
Okay.
Just to start.
So what we did is we created a Node.js.
Actually, anybody here published an NPM module? Oh no. Okay.
Okay. So using Node.js, which is a JavaScript runtime on the server, we built a module that talks to NHL.com, which is like a hockey website, and screen scrapes and pulls out the statistics. So we have a few tests here, and I'm going to output what this actually looks like, so because no one's actually seen what these payloads look like. So let's just console.log players.
So our earlier thesis, we wanted to build an app that helped us check out the different players in the NHL. The NHL.com website, we're Canadian, so that's why. And so the NHL.com website it doesn't have an API. And so we're screen scraping it, and then we're creating an API in the form of a library right now. And our next big step is going to be, so this is the NHL.com website. It's basically terrible. And it's really hard to pull data out of, and it's difficult to work with, and there's nothing programmatic about it. So we're going to screen scrape that and paint over the differences and give ourselves a nice clean API, and then we're going to build 3 clients. We're going to build a web client, an Android client, and an iOS client for it.
So what we ended up
40 minutes.
doing is turning this into this as a library, and we have it, published to right here.
NPM is the package manager for Node.js. You're going to see us use it a lot. It's like a Swiss Army knife. We're working with JavaScript libraries. It's a lot of fun. To publish a module to NPM, all you have to do is type npm publish and have a manifest called package.json.
So what we need to do now is put the HTTP interface on. So I'm going to go to nodejs.org. And we will use the example they have here. So I'm just going to go to my desktop, and
you've now used every text editor.
And we'll leave
TextMake and Vim.
We'll leave these semicolons in.
The Holy Trinity.
So this is the Hello World example that Node.js provides on the website. It starts with requiring HTTP, which is a built-in library it's a core library in Node, and we use this HTTP to create this server. And what we pass into this create server function, it is a function that we want it to execute anytime a web request comes in. We're listening on port LEET, which is kind of awkward. I'm going to change that. I will go port and pass in process.env.port or 9000. That'll just make our lives a little bit easier. And we'll replace this with port.
Shell shock. Total shell shock vector.
Yeah. So we can run this by just running node server, and that output is actually, we will change this to just say All right, so it's listening on 9000. We can go to localhost 9000, and we get our hello world.
Node makes it pretty easy to kick up little servers, but the interface is actually pretty low level. And working with just raw HTTP is cool, but completely unnecessary. There's a number of web frameworks out there that kind of like aim to be the Sinatra, as it were, of Node.js. There's one in particular that I like, and Brock likes, called Express. There's another one called Happy that's becoming pretty popular. You're not limited to working low level or with a particular high level. It's totally up to you how you want to do it.
Yeah. So kind of what I want to point out here is the request and response object, REQ and RES here. So REQ is basically all the information that you're given about the request that's coming in, like the URLs and like if there's any data that's being passed in, if it's
Headers.
the method, the headers, so like if it's a get or a post. And we can parse it and do this all manually if you want. Naturally, there's like libraries, as Brian mentioned, that kind of give you a more like developer-friendly experience on this. So I'll just show you what that is here. We got expressjs.org, is that right?
I think it's .com. Maybe it's org. Yeah.
No.
Definitely not org.
Someone's
squatting it.
Yeah. So just to give you an idea of what this looks like. So this is almost the same thing as what I just showed you. This is just using this library instead. So it creates a server right here, and then you can pass in routes. And in this particular case, on a GET request, on a GET request, it's giving us the request and the response object right there. And if you don't set any headers, it's got some defaults for you and things like that. Also the content length. So let's use this. Actually going to need to make a project. We'll call it NHL API. And
npm init. So npm init's going to create a package JSON file, which is your manifest for your project. We did it earlier, and then we published that. It's just a really convenient way to be able to kind of note where all your dependencies are, what your test command is, and the main entry point for the app. And now when Brock adds dependencies like Express, when he does the -- save, that's going to put that into your dev dependencies. Node has a really interesting package system. The packages are lexically scoped. And so there's a concept that's called node modules folder. And in that folder, your dependencies exist. And those modules can have their own dependencies, which could even be like the same or different versions than other dependencies in the tree. And they'll never conflict with each other because they're all lexically scoped, which is really nice. Not something any other language really enjoys.
so I just moved that server file over into this project, but we're going to, rather than use HTTP, we're going to use Express, which will require HTTP under the hood for us. And we'll just stick to the same port that we were before. And again, I'm sorry, I'm not putting semicolons everywhere. You'll just have to cringe, and it's almost like whiteboard, chalkboard. Okay, so we now should have essentially the same thing we did before, but the only difference is
you do npm start.
npm start. It defaults to server. Sweet. Yeah. Okay, and we go localhost 9000. Okay, so we've got a web server running, and now what we need to do is require our NHL module and use it, and just wrap that in the HTTP. So to do that, we can actually npm install install NHL, which is our library that we created. Now we're going to actually use it. and var NHL is equal to require NHL. And now we can take in arguments from the URL. So we're going to want something along the lines of team and season, and we will pass this into NHL team, and we can reference it from that request object. So request params dot team and request dot params dot season, and we probably want some defaults or something to fall back. We'll let you, like, you can polish that up and make that right. I think you guys all get that. Now the last step is to actually respond with the response of the payload. So
in the node style, you're always passing functions as the last argument, and those functions always have error as the first arity, and the players or the data as the second. Node kind of wants to encourage you to do this so that you deal with your errors before you deal with your data, so that you have the most performant app as possible. This last function style with the error first is kind of how the node standard library works, and so it's considered the node practice, but it's not in any way mandatory. If you want to use promises, or if you have other flow control ideas, you're 100% free to do that. Just make sure the rest of the team doesn't want to kill you if you do diverge from what the runtime does.
So I'm actually what's going on here?
Are you offline?
Maybe.
Nope.
Okay, let's see what it says here. Version not found.
Oh.
I actually sneakily went to an older version that I think is a little bit more polished. And
yeah. So it looks like we're installing a lot of stuff, and we are, but those are all dependencies of other modules that we're depending on, so you don't really have to worry about those affecting your app scope, and this is why you kind of get to stand on the shoulders of the giants.
yeah, a lot of these libraries are extremely small, like often just like one function and like a couple dozen lines of code or less.
People say writing large JavaScript applications is really hard, and they're right. And so the solution is to not write large JavaScript applications. Write lots of small ones. It's way easier to reason about a small program than it is about really large ones.
So if this all worked, we should be able to npm start.
npm start's just a shortcut to call your main, whatever your main is in your package JSON.
And we'll actually try the API. So Oilers 2010, 2011 is the season we want. Let's see if this works. Woo! Yay! I'll make that look a little better. JSON.stringify players. This is so intuitive.
So you just passed
oh, I need to
the indentation.
Restart. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
And we should be able to pass in
Try
Canucks.
That was a good team.
Is Hansen on here?
Oh yeah, he'll be in there.
Yannick Hansen, who's another
Oh yeah, he was
Dane.
Danish. That's right. And they call him the Danish Dash.
He had 9 goals and 20 assists in that season.
Yep.
Not bad for, he's a right winger. All right. So what we got is we got an API now that returns the payloads. We're scraping them, and now it's time to deploy them. to deploy this API so that we can write a client. So we're going to do this like cooking show style where we like put in the raw turkey and then like take out the new one. And we have this running at nhl.chloe.io. And here's our API. So we can pass in Oilers and 2010, 2011.
Should do 87 or something.
Sure, let's try it.
Back when the Oilers were good.
Oh, that's 1987. 1988. I hope this doesn't break. All right, it works.
Yeah.
Sort of.
I did it cache. Unless there's been another Nugent Hopkins.
Anyway.
We'll pretend that worked. It works.
Okay.
There's lots of deployment options for Node. It's kind of become trivially easy. You can deploy using Heroku in around 5 minutes. I wouldn't recommend that for necessarily production apps, but for your own hacks, it's totally worthwhile. Elastic Beanstalk from Amazon is actually a fantastic choice, or if you enjoy administering your own servers, DigitalOcean is another really good way to go. All right. So we're going to get into part 2 now, the HTML5 client. And Brock and I are big web dudes. This is kind of, a little while ago someone asked me what are my 3 favorite front-end libraries, and I said HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This is my smart-ass response. The web stack is, it's a lot of pain, but it's also a lot of fun. And there's a whole lot of ideas around why the web is a good thing, which we probably don't have to get into. Brock's a creator of a static web server called Harp, and yeah, you should talk about it because you built it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so what we need to serve HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is a static web server. You could really use whichever one you want. We're going to show you Harp, and the only real difference here is like Harp does it does some implicit pre-processing for you. So it means that like you might see this, but really what the server sees is this. So we can write in these fancy languages that all the kids are all excited about, which is like Jade and Sass and CoffeeScript, and it's just going to precompile that for us.
These things are a huge productivity boost. They're not necessary, and I'm not even necessarily saying this is the future, but it's definitely worth checking out. And so these are what are called sort of transpiled languages. You write in this higher level language like CoffeeScript, for example, but it compiles down to JavaScript, and Sass will compile to CSS, and Jade compiles to HTML. There's lots of rough corners in all the languages that are out there, and precompilers kind of or preprocessors let you kind of walk around those rough spots. Sass in particular may as well just be the new standard for CSS. If you're still writing CSS by hand, you're basically causing yourself unnecessary pain. Yeah, those are basically my thoughts on that. CoffeeScript's up for debate. A lot of JavaScript guys hate it. I don't really have an opinion. I think it's fine. If you like white space languages like Python, CoffeeScript might appeal to you. And then Jade makes no sense to me at all, but you like it, and that's cool.
Yeah. I think that's what we're seeing is like a lot of like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is more and more becoming just a build target. And so we're seeing like actual programming languages being written that compile to JavaScript. And it doesn't seem to be slowing down. And I think that we're going to see a whole new breed of developers that are going to come around, and these are going to be the languages that they cut their teeth on. And so I wouldn't expect this to go away. Like if you're waiting for the standards to kind of pick up on what Sass is doing and whatnot, you might be waiting a while. So, so take it or leave it. Use it if you like it. I still like writing just vanilla JavaScript, but like if you like CoffeeScript, use it. If it makes you more productive, it's totally cool. So don't be afraid of these languages, and try. I'd encourage you to try to avoid dogma around like which one's right or not, and
Yeah.
just use what makes you productive, because at the end of the day, it's like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that's going to the user. And all we really want is developers to have a code base that's manageable and easy to maintain, and we want to deliver the smallest, tiniest assets as possible to the browser or to the user.
Totally. The other kind of angle here, Brock was one of the original creators of a thing called PhoneGap. PhoneGap's another way of saying Cordova now. This confuses people, and so I'm going to address it just so I don't have to answer this question later at the bar. So Brock, myself, and a bunch of other guys got together at Adobe, and you know, just after Steve Jobs announced the iPhone and said that we were going to write web apps, we were cheering. And then a year later, he gifted us Objective-C SDK called the iPhone SDK, and a lot of people were happy about that, but we weren't among them. But we found out that you could embed a web browser, and we thought that was pretty cool. Fast forward to today, or a few years later, and Adobe was acquiring the company that we worked at called Adobe. And Adobe had been working on PhoneGap for 3 years at that point. And we had a really good, rigorous open source contribution process whereby we had an inbound license called a contributor license agreement. And a contributor license agreement is basically a way of a contributor saying, I agreed to the terms of the outbound license, and I'm granting you this code under that copyright. And that's great, except for that inbound licensing named Adobe, and Adobe was about to get bought by Adobe. And we had contributors from IBM and Intel and Microsoft. And IBM, Intel, and Microsoft and others weren't really thrilled about the idea of a whole bunch of IP that they had contributed suddenly being owned by Adobe. And so we worked with the Apache Software Foundation to donate all the source code of PhoneGap to them. They didn't want the name, they wanted a clean slate. And so effectively, PhoneGap in 2011 became Apache Cordova. And the name PhoneGap became a downstream of Apache Cordova. And so this is very much like, I don't know, WebKit and Blink, that kind of thing. It's just a different name for the same thing, effectively. Cordova's become a lot higher level, or sorry, lower level, and PhoneGap has become a lot higher level. Adobe's agenda with PhoneGap is to kind of bring it to designers and people who may not necessarily code full-time, so people that are more in their creative realm. And Cordova is remaining very low level, and it's a toolkit for building apps using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which is what we're really all about.
In practical terms, if you're using Cordova, you're essentially doing your compiling locally. And so you need to have the Android SDK installed and the iOS SDK installed, and it will detect it and it will like do the compiling for you. Whereas PhoneGap will actually move your assets up to the cloud and do the build on the server. So if you want an easier path, like you can just use PhoneGap, or you can do it locally and be more bare metal.
Yeah, so there's going to definitely, we'll demonstrate all this stuff for you, but it's hard, man. So when you're building an app for iOS and Android, you have to install the iOS and Android SDKs. And I just went through this morning, and it still took me like, I don't know, 45 minutes probably of buggering around with settings. And then if you're going to target Windows Phone and BlackBerry and Firefox OS, these are all their own compilation kind of nightmares too. PhoneGap Build paints over all those differences. It's free, so you know it's worthwhile checking out. If you have a Creative Cloud membership, you're already signed up anyways. And all you do is you post your assets up here, and then we spit back binaries for you for the platforms that we support. Pretty simple, and then you can choose what platforms you want. Yeah, it doesn't do much, but it does that, and that's all it should do.
Yeah, I think another thing I'd like to add about using Cordova or PhoneGap, I mean, it's tempting to want to think of it as this like 10x multiplier in productivity, and like, oh, you'll get on all these platforms like piece of cake and stuff, and like I wouldn't approach it that way. Like, there's a learning curve still, and you got to get a bit familiar with the environments of the different like SDKs. But if you're a proficient web developer, this is a tool that should be in your tool chain, and it's going to help you and make your life a lot easier, especially if you're already developing for the web, which I believe you should be. there's also another paradigm that I think is important to point out, which when we talk about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, we're talking specifically about those as a build target, which means that you can take those assets and you can put them on a server and run a static web server, or you can put them in Cordova. It doesn't really we're not talking about making like server-side requests and like having a server-side session and the like Rails or
Page
LAMP
reloads.
stack and page reloads. So this is really about like a self-contained client of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that can talk to external APIs or different resources.
Yeah, some people call them single-page web apps or SPAs, single-page apps. That pattern isn't 100% necessary, but you probably want to do it. And the reason you want to do it is because you want to create a user experience indistinguishable from the experience you get in native. When we're navigating on the web, there's big page reloads and flashes, and that type of experience on a phone is going to feel jarring and out of place. And so you still have to, Cordova does not give you any help on the UI. That's your problem. And we don't want to have an opinion there. There's a very explicit choice. We don't believe that this is our job necessarily. There's plenty of libraries out there that take care of those problems, and it's up to you to find the one that fits your needs. If you like Ember.js, by all means, use Ember.js. If you like Angular, use that. The real popular one, and I may as well just spoiler alert this, but it's called Ionic. This is based on Cordova. It's a downstream. I can safely say it is by far and away the most popular choice now in the Cordova community. You use this, and this is a multiplier. So this gives you the ability to build apps that look beautiful. I'm just looking for like their demo-y stuff so you can see it for yourself. What's included, blah, blah, blah. Oh, they used to have these awesome, oh, maybe this is it. I'll let you check it out for yourself. But if you want to build an app that targets all the places Cordova targets and you find AngularJS okay, these guys have taken care of all the CSS for you. And so the apps that are built with Ionic are indistinguishable from native. So we're going to do this. We're going to build an Angular-based app, but we're not going to build like something that's super like high fidelity or fancy. We just want to give you the demonstration of how to do this, and then it's up to you to take it to the next level. We're going to deploy it using a new tool that Brock's built called Surge, which is a fancy CDN effectively that works like Harp. And then as the last step, we'll wrap it up with Apache Cordova. So should I try and drive?
Yeah, I think you can drive.
Okay. I think I have all these things, so I don't need to do that. Oh, I like this lady. She's sick of my shit. She just wants me to write code. Let's just see if I have Harp.
Can you bump up your...
Oh, sorry, guys. Oh. I have a Harp. I have a Surge. And I have a Cordova. I'm ready to go. What am I doing?
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is build an Angular app to consume that API.
Oh, I think
So
you have one
go.
in your GitHub.
We've got one that's pre-baked. Again, cooking show. Ding.
What's it called?
It's at syntaxy NHL-client.
Ah, should have known. Cool. Well, this is pretty simple. Sweet. Nice. Do you actually have fonts? You really do.
And we're using Bootstrap. You'll notice here, like, we didn't go to Bootstrap, and this is kind of highlights one of the advantages of using Harp is that we're actually using the Bootstrap source files. So those are like right out of the repo. They're carousel and they're grid, and you can omit that. But if you look in the main.less, we're importing this underscore bootstrap, and Harp is going to package all that up and serve it as a single main.css file, and it's just going to do that implicitly. So we can change background colors and change variables in Bootstrap without having to like recreate this library, if that makes sense to everybody.
Is it Harp server? Yeah, that's what it is. Okay. Let's check this thing out, man. Whoa.
All right. So
Blackhawks. Nobody likes the Blackhawks. The only team I like less is the Flames. Oh, wait, it's like an order of teams I hate. Brock's favorite team's the Oilers. That's why I like to bug him about them.
So, I mean, you're probably filling in the gaps, but we have two drop downs. One is to change your team, and the other one is to change the season. And this is just returning that payload. And I'm no good with Angular or on the front end, but this is.
Hey, it's responsive.
Yeah. With 100%.
So that worked. That's cool. I'm just gonna take a quick look. I use Vim, but don't judge me. You don't have to use it. It's totally cool. People use different tools. I just got used to it. Okay.
You can add Canucks to that list if you want. Oh, at the top. What a guy.
Cool. That's a pretty simple Angular app. And so, anybody here writing Angular these days? Oh yeah. See, this is becoming a thing. Yeah.
And everyone's like, right now, like, oh, why is he putting that on scope? It's not
Yeah,
cool.
it's bad.
Sorry.
For those uninitiated, Angular is a framework being sponsored currently by Google for writing JavaScript. It's becoming pretty popular, and I think the main reason it's becoming popular is because it's super testable. But there's others, notably Ember.js and React are also very popular. Maybe a couple years ago I would have been talking about Backbone.js, which is also pretty good. Backbone's not even really a framework, it's more like a library for eventing. All these things are completely open to you though on the web, and you can use all of them, which is kind of awesome.
You should open the index file. There is one.
This one?
Mm-hmm.
Is this readable for you guys?
Other than
Other
how
than
it's written.
Other than the Jade thing. Yeah.
So this is using Jade, but like there's nothing like really crazy going on here. It's a lot more straightforward than it maybe looks. Basically, it's just another way to write markup. So like creating an H1 or an H5 tag, and we're injecting some variables in there. So if that's confusing to you, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll hop back out to my shell. I'm going to start up Harp server. And so Harp is kind of neat that it's a static asset server, but it compiles all this stuff for you. So you don't have to do any of this pre-processing business yourself. And so now here we go. What? Where's my Canucks? There we go. Much better. So here's a view source of what's going on. Harp automatically just turned all that crazy Jade into regular vanilla HTML. And it turned all that less from Bootstrap into regular CSS for us, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, actually, that's maybe worth showing as well. So like,
where I go to find my, where's my CSS? I wonder if I can follow it through here, probably. Nope. Main.css. Style editor. Oh, booyah. Ooh. There we go. That's nice, Mozilla. Good job. Yeah, so this compiled all that less for us, and so all that magical imports, we get that whole beautiful megabyte of CSS from Bootstrap all in one big go. Yes, I am making fun of Bootstrap. A megabyte of CSS to style buttons, really? Yeah, so there you go. That's a quick look at Harp. We've built an API effectively that can fetch from NHL.com, and it can display that back. We could deploy this. Maybe that's the next step.
Yeah, let's put it online.
Okay, so Harp was cool. We got to check it out. We were working locally. I'm going to run Surge. Yeah, that'll work. And my password. Add
You
whip.
can do NHL.surge. So Surge is just like a way to get assets online. It's like S3, but you can just put them online through the command line. And it's in alpha stage right now, but you're getting a peek at it. So the other options that you could use for deploying this, you could use like GitHub pages. You could run your own static web server like Apache or Nginx and put that on your own machine. S3, you could put these assets on S3.
Yeah. Static asset hosting is a real thing. I think like I know my fascination started back in 2010 when PhoneGap.com was still WordPress. Do you remember that? Or maybe it was 2009, and we were struggling heavily. We kept like adding caching layers and doing all kinds of weird voodoo WordPress, and eventually we came to the conclusion that the only truly web scale solution was static assets. And yeah, so we started publishing PhoneGap.com as a static website. We do all the compilation offline, and it's a blazing fast solution as a result. So that was deploying with Surge. It doesn't really get much easier than that. I guess it's time to build an app.
Did you test it? Does it work?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Cool.
we're here. We're live. Actually, I didn't test. Yeah.
All right.
Works.
Ship it. It's done.
Ship it. Check it out. Henrik Sedin, 7039. Oh, Canucks. Okay.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So we're just showing you guys ways. We're not telling you this is the way in any way whatsoever, if that makes sense. So should I do a, what do you think? Should I do like a Harp compile?
Sure.
Would that be the way?
Yep. Do you know how to do it?
I can't remember, but I'll find out really fast. Of course. Project path, output path. So I'm going to go out one, and I'm going to call it NHL. Whoa.
It's 2 arguments. One is the source, and then where you want to go to. So you might want to, yeah.
Oh. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Harp will automatically do this compilation for you when you're serving. But I want to pre-compile everything because I'm going to package it now using Apache Cordova. So Cordova, create. And I can do a thing called link to, I believe. Whoops. I just created a thing called link pwd. Where am I? Okay. I'm going to do Cordova, create, NHL, app, link to NHL compiled.
I love live coding.
Yeah.
It's like watching a car crash sometimes.
What are you saying? You can see me
like,
thinking through what I'm
is
supposed
he
to be
going to
doing.
come out alive? Yeah.
Okay, so now we got an NHL app. This is a standard Cordova project. It's using a symlink to get to the compiled assets, but that's okay. www is kind of where everything happens in Cordova, but there's these extra folders. And so we've got a concept of plugins, we've got a concept of platforms, and then we have a concept of hooks. So let's add a platform. That's probably like the first thing we want to do. Cordova platform, add iOS and Android. And oh, let's take a look at that. Whoa! Oh, I was in a subshell there. Cordova NHL client, NHL app. Okay, so I just added Android and iOS, and this was pretty simple. Under the hood, though, we've created native iOS and Android projects. Sometimes this confuses people, but Cordova is entirely native. You're just getting a full-screen web view, but you have full access to everything that the phone has access to. It's a complete native project. So should you wish, you can write as much Objective-C and Java as your heart desires. So that was cool. Let's do Cordova run iOS. I don't have an iPhone plugged in, so it's going to compile it and it's going to pump it onto a simulator. Eventually. It's a MacBook Air from 4 years ago. It sometimes struggles with the new Xcode. Oh, shit.
Ooh, that dropped
Native. So you can see our responsive design is working as expected. We're getting data out of the NHL Scraper API that we've put up, and that's an iOS client, so that's pretty good. Let's see what happens on Android. So I do have an Android phone plugged in. Oh, shoot. How am I going to do this? Can I type this faster than Android compiles? Hell yeah, I can. Android's kind of slow. So, some point. Oh yeah, this is that crunch command. I don't know what crunch does, but it takes a long time to do it. Come on, Captain Crunch. Yeah, this is a very realistic portrayal of Android development. One of the big benefits to working with Apache Cordova, oh, something's happening. So it didn't find an emulator. Did it say a starting one? Oh, AVDs, no.
We have 2 minutes, I think. Is that right? Yeah.
Oh, that's why. I think I unplugged my phone by mistake. Oh yeah. ADB devices. Oh, ADB not found.
Uh-oh.
What? No. Okay, you're definitely finding it. Let me try this one more time, and if not, then you'll just have to take my word for it. So what I was going to say is that being regular web development, most PhoneGap developers just build, installing app on device. This is the joy of Android and mobile dev in general, that you...
There we go.
So it works.
Yeah.
So 3 platforms. 1 minute to go. Not bad. Most people just do their development in the browser, and then they treat PhoneGap as a publishing step, very much like Surge and Harp do. Really, you shouldn't be spending your time compiling and waiting for something to show up on the device. You should be building your app and testing it. Oh, yeah.
You want to go?
All right. So this, I guess, is our big disclaimer. We're both obviously web developers, and we're big advocates for the whole thing. The promise of the web is that anybody in the world has their own ability to publish whatever they want, and everybody in the world has access to that. That's a pretty good idea. Like, I like that as just a general idea. The web also makes a whole bunch of promises on how easy and accessible it is and how simple it is. This is the part where maybe it falls down a little bit, and we're not entirely sure that's it. And so like a parable would be some dude named Bob. And Bob wants to publish to the web, and he should be able to. As a citizen of this earth, he should have the ability to share any information he wants with everybody that wants to get it. All Bob has to do is know how to do all this shit. And it's not that it's that bad to learn how to provision VMs, install web servers, route DNS, and load balancing, but we got work to do to make this internet publishing thing a little bit easier. We're not saying that web development, the way we're doing it, is the way to do it. If you're a .NET developer, you probably want to check out C# and Xamarin. If you're a Java developer, I feel really bad for you. Anyhow, that's about it.
Yeah.
I was just kidding about the Java thing. I like Java. It's just so easy to make fun of it. If you guys have any questions, well, actually, I think we might have a question period. Do we?
Yeah.
Cool. Yes.
So what is the advantage, real advantage of packaging an HTML application or HTML code and putting it in a application, Android or iOS? Isn't it just better just to have my server and let people visit my site?
I think so.
I would argue that is better, but you know, we can't always impose our will on users, right? And so sometimes like a user is just comfortable going to the App Store, and that's how they like to use their device. That's how they're comfortable. That's how they were taught to do it. And really, who are we to say otherwise that they shouldn't be able to do that, right? So I think you want to make your application just as accessible to your users as possible, and this is just one way to do it. So I think that even though like I might have some philosophical objections to the app stores and like prefer the web as a platform, if we have users that want an iOS app, then I suggest that we give it to them, you know, rather than forcing their hand.
Sadly, a lot of studies are showing that people don't search for things. They go to app stores now, and especially a younger generation. So this is just a deploy target to get you there. I agree with you, though. I think the web's the better way.
What about the device capabilities? Don't you have better access to the device in the PhoneGap and Chrome?
Yeah, so PhoneGap has or Cordova has a concept of plugins. It's funny because we seem to have topped out around just under around 400. So these plugins allow you to access whatever native bits are available on a particular platform. And an example of a plugin, just to show you one, Apache Cordova plugin. Let's do camera because that's more exciting. So prior to PhoneGap, if you wanted to access the camera on a web browser, you had to use Flash. But now we've got a thing called the Media Capture API. Media Capture API actually came out of analysis over Cordova. And so a Cordova plugin gives a webby interface to all these different native platforms. And you'll notice that we've recently added a new one. So this is a bit of a mind bender, but we've added the browser itself as a platform. We really want to try and get back to browser-based development, standards-based development. We're not there right now. There's a lot of platforms and fragmentation, but at least PhoneGap lets you paint over that stuff. In the case of when you're deploying an app that uses a capability that's not available, you'll have to do some kind of like lookup. Does this thing actually have a front-facing camera or a back-facing camera that I can use? And then once you know those capabilities, then you can make your app responsive to that. I don't love it that the web is playing catch-up, but it is. So this is kind of a polyfill for that future.
Just a quick question from the GOTO app.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about TypeScript?
I like TypeScript. Question was, what do we think of TypeScript? I like it a lot. Yeah, it's a neat language. Microsoft's pouring a ton of thinking into it. It's fun. It's got an awesome module system too.
Yeah, the question goes a little about the type safety in Cordova.
Well, TypeScript doesn't have types. It has hints. That's one of the first things. So TypeScript just suggests that this might be a particular type. Cordova doesn't really enforce any of this stuff. If you do like types, there's a bunch of alternatives out there that will compile ultimately down to JavaScript. But you're not going to be able to check those types at runtime necessarily. Yeah, if types are your thing, you know, Haskell compilers to JavaScript exist. Whether that's a good idea or not, that's an exercise for the user. Do you have an opinion on types and TypeScript? And
well, I think I like the advent of these new languages that are compiling to JavaScript, and so you have some choice, right? And if if our build targets are well defined, as crufty as they may be, like we can develop these languages that are more appetizing, I guess. And so if TypeScript's your thing or CoffeeScript's your thing, I think it's great. Like, go ahead and try it and push the boundaries. And I don't really believe in the dogma of of how what types of languages you're supposed to use. You should use what makes your users happy by you making better applications. So.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. I'd love the idea that we could maybe start mix and matching these things a little bit. And then like different tooling for different folks. Like I like to rock Vim, but there's a lot of people that love Visual Studio with good reason. It's an awesome IDE, and it's got first-class support for both Cordova and TypeScript. And so if you want to write apps that do that, you can.
Cool.
I think it's beer time now.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for your patience and for your help. It was
fun.
We needed you guys to get through it.